Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your Chief Security Fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing Breaches of the Week. Now, as always, before I begin, I'd like to thank the following people that sent me messages, texted me, whatever it was, to get me this information. It is always appreciated. And that would be Chris Fellon, Scott Newberger, Sanders Slidenerink, David Walker, Jason Dance, Jacqueline Wolf, and Barrett Peterson. Thank you so much. And if you have a tip for me, please feel free to send it my way, and I will give you a shout out here and on my radio show as well. And with that, let's dive in and start with BladeHQ.com. They are a knife seller. They recently sent a letter to those that they identified as being part of a data breach, and apparently they had a payment skimmer on their website maliciously installed between January 7th and March 22nd of this year. And apparently on April 11th was when they went ahead and exfiltrated all of that information, or that was the last part of the incident. So heads up to you, BladeHQ.com customers. You might be getting notified if you haven't already. Moving on, let's talk about the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma. They are the 47th largest city in the United States, and they just got hit with a ransomware attack over this past weekend that has affected the city government's network and brought down its official websites. Now, the attack, which took place on basically the night between Friday and Saturday, is currently being handled by the city's IT team, which has managed to restore the city's websites, according to a spokesperson. Their teams are also working to recover impacted systems from backups. Now, the attack is believed to have impacted only a small portion of the city's network, and the intrusion could have had much more severe consequences if it hit the city during a working day when most of the computers were turned on. Fortunately, they got hit on a weekend. A lot of things were shut down. So the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, hopefully you'll be back on your feet really soon. Moving on, let's talk about Ireland's health service. This is the HSE. They just shut down all of their IT systems on Friday following a significant ransomware attack that disrupted their COVID-19 testing and other patient services, according to the BBC. Now, the country's COVID-19 vaccination program does not appear to have been affected, though. Now, government officials are telling basically local news outlets that an international criminal cyber group is responsible for this attack. This is not espionage, apparently. This is just an attack from a cyber criminal gang, according to the Minister of State for Public Procurement and E-Government. Now, the country's prime minister also mentioned, Michael Martin, that Ireland will not be paying this ransom, and here we are. So heads up, citizens of Ireland. Moving on, let me give you a Code Cove update. If you recall, this code coverage platform, Code Cove, suffered an incident last month in which attackers broke through its defenses and modified its uploader scripts, meaning hundreds of clients who executed this script may have also been compromised. And so now companies are starting to disclose that they were caught up in this. And the first one is cybersecurity firm Rapid7 that said their source code may have been limitedly accessed or accessed in a very limited manner. So heads up, Rapid7. Hopefully that won't affect you. Moving on, let's talk about Flipkart and Amazon, and this is actually an update on the Big Basket data breach coming out of India. According to basically an expert, Raja Shikhar Rajaharia, criminals are selling sets of email addresses and passwords of customers from the allegedly leaked databases of the grocery platform Big Basket that match with accounts on e-commerce firms Amazon and Flipkart. So basically, change your passwords if you use both Big Basket and have an Amazon or Flipkart account, because they're basically taking that Flipkart credentials and using them to hit your Amazon or your Flipkart. Obviously, a very serious problem. Moving on, let me give you guys an update on the Washington, D.C. Metro Police. If you recall a few weeks back or a month or so ago, they were hit and information basically was stolen from them, including information on informants by the Babak ransomware gang. This gang is thought to have ties to the Russian government as well. This past Friday, Babak said that it published its quote-unquote full data on the Washington Metropolitan Police Department, claiming the department's payment offer wasn't enough to prevent the release. And here we are. And to quote them, "We publish the full data of the police department, including HR gang database. You will find a full range of all data. This is an indicator of why we should pay. And here you are. That obviously is a very serious issue for the Washington, D.C. Metro Police, and so we'll see what happens here, but that information is now officially being released. Moving on, let's talk about the insurance giant AXA. This is actually an interesting one. Now, only a week ago or so, basically international insurance agent AXA decided to halt ransomware crime reimbursement in France, meaning if you're a company in France that has a cyber liability insurance, they would no longer cover your ransom. They basically did this, and they had a plan to basically expand that strategy globally. AXA justified this by putting forth the ethical aspect of providing financial support and thus incentive to ransomware gangs, only to see them basically grow and as they are taking the money that AXA is paying out on these cyber insurance policies. Now, the ransomware group Avedon has announced the victimization of the AXA group and is basically giving the company 240 hours from time of incident to communicate and cooperate with them. And if that doesn't happen, they are now threatening to leak 3 terabytes of sensitive data, allegedly including the following from AXA, which includes customer medical reports, such as what's included there is HIV, hepatitis, STDs, and other illness reports, customer claims, payments to the customers, all of the customer IDs, all customer bank account scan papers, hospitals and doctor reserved material such as private investigations for fraud, reserved agreements, denied reimbursements, contracts, reports, ID cards, etc., etc., etc. So this is a very interesting case, in the sense that AXA has basically said, we're not going to be paying ransoms, for any one of our customers if you're an insurance policy, which then begs the question. I think a lot of companies would understand this and start shopping for another insurance provider, but here we are. They got hit themselves. So are they going to practice what they preach, or are they going to have all their customer data essentially dumped out there? That's a massive, massive reputation damage hit to AXA. So we will see what happens. I will keep you informed. Moving on. Let's talk about United Valor Solutions out of Jacksonville, North Carolina. They're a contractor for the Department of Veteran Affairs, or VA, that provides disability evaluation services for the VA and other government agencies. Now, a database containing the personal and protected health information of almost 200,000 U.S. military veterans has been discovered to be accessible online. Now, this database, which contains things like veterans' names, dates of birth, contact information, medical information, appointment information, unencrypted passwords, that's awesome, and billing information, could be accessed without a password. Basically, it was exposed wide open. The database could have been viewed and downloaded by anybody, and the information in the database could have been altered or deleted apparently as well. Now, it's unclear for how long the database was exposed. However, United Valor Solutions says the database only appears to have been accessed by internal IP addresses and the researcher that found it. Hopefully that is true. It is now locked down. Moving on. Let's talk about the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, or RPI, which is what I will be calling them. They are in Troy, New York. Now, this is actually another really interesting one, because RPI has been silent on the scope of the data breach that took down its servers and required their final exams to actually be canceled. Now, with RPI's system still down, students, faculty, and staff have no access to their emails, RPI websites, dining dollars, I presume that's like a student-loaded account, or Wi-Fi accounts on the campus wireless infrastructure. Here's where it gets interesting, though. The university is also requiring all students and faculty to download quote-unquote security software on any device connected to the university's network as it begins to partially restore services. Student and faculty have a problem with this, and basically they have been organizing on Reddit to push back on the requirement to download basically the security software, which is CrowdStrike Falcon, which allows essentially an outside company kernel-level access to all parts of the computer, such as apps opened, websites visited, email communication, obviously creating security and privacy concerns for the students. In the meantime, faculty have created Gmail and WebEx accounts to stay connected with their students as they continue to recover from this. That's obviously a very interesting thing, and one of the reasons why we preach to businesses why you basically should not allow home users, or rather your employees, to use personally owned devices. The company should own everything. That's how you bypass this issue, because they do have such intimate access to understand the behavioral patterns of the users, and also of potential threats as well. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this one plays out, but I thought that was interesting news of the week. Now, moving on. Let me give you guys a quick update on the Excellion file transfer breach. This happened quite a while ago, and multiple organizations have been basically declaring data breaches, and this week is no different. And so this week, the University of California has declared that they were using Excellion and therefore got hit. So heads up to you, University of California employees and students. Moving on, let's talk about the UK's NHS, or National Health Service. NHS Digital is revising its process for booking COVID vaccinations in England after the discovery of a, quote, seriously shocking failure that leaked medical data from their site. Now, the website lets users make appointments using their NHS number, or if they don't have it on hand, some basic identity information. But in this process, users' vaccination status is disclosed, allowing anyone who possesses basic personal details of a friend, colleague, or stranger to find out what should be confidential medical information under UK law. Employers, therefore, in theory, since they have all of that information on you, could be able to find out which of their staff have been vaccinated, while others may feel under pressure not to get the vaccine for fear of criticism from anti-vaccination friends or colleagues. So basically, if I had basic information on you, like let's say an address, phone number, last name, first name, all that kind of stuff, I could go on UK's website, assuming we were in England, and I know plenty of my listeners and followers are, punched in basic information, and it would have pulled up on whoever and given me information on them, including whether they were vaccinated or not. So if I'm lying about being vaccinated, you technically could have proven that, and here we are. So obviously a huge issue. NHS is correcting. Moving on, let's talk about graduation cap and gown vendor Herf Jones. Now here's what's going on, and this one too may or may not be a data breach. It's interesting. So a woman named Maria Ochoa, who is a psychology senior, tweeted about her debit card information being stolen last Sunday and received numerous replies of students having similar issues. Quote, I ordered my cap and gown back in February or March. Just a few days ago, I received an email and phone call from my bank stating that my card information was hacked, but no money was taken from my account. She was part of a group, basically part of a group chat on a platform called Group Me with other graduating seniors who were confused about irregular bank activity. Quote, one member of the group searched up Herf Jones on Twitter and found many tweets from other students on different campuses talking about how there's a nationwide breach and money has been stolen from their accounts. So this is actually very interesting to see what's going on here. If Herf Jones is doing this, if there's some kind of cyber threat there, if they are querying the credit cards in some weird way due to misprogramming, we are going to find that out. I will keep you up to date, but heads up, it's graduation season, and so if you're ordering things from Herf Jones or your cap and gown, and you see that, you may be one of the growing number of students that has that issue. Moving on, we're going to be talking about a library in Quebec, and the reason why I'm stuttering is because it is the Bibliothèque et Archives Nationales du Québec, and I apologize to my French-speaking listeners or viewers, because I'm sorry, I don't speak French. I'm just going to call it a large library in Montreal, which is exactly what the article says. Because that large library in Montreal will be closed until Tuesday, basically in the wake of an attack, a cyber attack, on Quebec's public daycare registration website. Now, Quebec's Treasury Board Secretariat issued a recommendation this past Friday evening, urging all government bodies using software developed by the same company as a daycare registration site to immediately suspend access if they store information. Apparently, the personal data of 5,000 parents and children in Quebec was compromised in this attack, which was first reported this past Tuesday. So obviously, that's a huge issue. We'll see what happens. I'm not sure why they're shutting down the library. I'm guessing the library is running that daycare website in some way, shape, or form. But heads up to you if you're in Montreal and you have basically kids in the daycare system via your library or however that works up there. Heads up. Moving on, let's talk about the entire state of Kansas. That's right, one of the 50 states here, Kansas. They have the highest identity theft rate in the entire nation. They're number one of 50, and they may have actually been impacted by a Department of Labor data breach, which may be the cause. Now, according to new data released by the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC, the reported rate of identity theft in Kansas in 2020 was higher than that of any other state and more than 3 times greater than the national average. Last year, 43,211 Kansans, I believe that's how you pronounce that, informed the FTC that someone had stolen or attempted to steal their identity. That was basically a year-on-year increase of 1,802%. Massive jump. Now, KWCH, that's local news, reported that Kansas lawmakers are investigating the possibility of a connection between the surge in identity theft and alleged data breach at the Kansas Department of Labor. And I remember all last year, we had multiple departments of labor from multiple states basically declaring data breaches. Kansas was one, Kentucky was another, I believe Oregon was a third, I think even Illinois, my state, got hit. So this is obviously a huge problem because obviously we had payments out for all of this, so cyber criminals are going to cyber crime. Here we are. So an investigation into this possible breach was launched after a woman named Lisa Hurst accidentally entered the wrong Social Security number into the Kansas Department of Labor website in February and was actually shown someone else's personal information, meaning they were using the Social Security number, which is essentially like our national ID here if you're not in the United States. They were using that number essentially as the authenticator, meaning if I, for whatever reason, had your Social Security number, I could look up your information. But here's the thing, these Social Security numbers are just numbers, and it's like, I think it's like 9 digits long if I'm remembering mine, off the top of my head, which I won't say here for obvious reasons, which means it would be very easy to create a number generator for this. And each state has their own designation of essentially the first block of numbers. So how essentially that falls into Social Security. So it would be very easy to start looking up Kansas citizen information in that way. That's obviously a very huge problem. So hopefully the Kansas Department of Labor will get that corrected, because Kansas right now is leading the way in identity theft breaches, which is crazy only because the population of Kansas is nowhere near some of the larger states like California, Texas, Illinois, or New York. So obviously that's a huge impact to their population. Moving on, let's go to our finalies here, because this week has been basically just the week of serious cloud misconfigurations. And let's start with Amazon AWS, because researchers reported this past Tuesday that Amazon Web Services System Manager, or SSM, misconfigurations led to the potential exposure of more than 5 million documents with personally identifiable information and credit card transactions on more than 3,000 SSM documents. Now, in a blog, researchers at Checkpoint Security said that they have worked with AWS Security to provide these customers with the necessary information to help them resolve any configurations they have with their SSM. Now, AWS SSM documents contain the operations that an AWS systems manager performs on a company's cloud assets. SSM documents are private by default, but developers can share them with other AWS accounts or publicly if they choose to configure them that way. And in analyzing the SSM documents, Checkpoint researchers found that the misconfigurations took place because developers did not follow the proper parameters of usage as defined in AWS best practices. According to researchers, a misconfigured public SSM can give an attacker valuable information about the account's internal resources and operations. This not only serves as a basis for social engineering attacks, but can lead to the exposure of additional resources. An SSM document can also provide an attacker an initial foothold into the victim's environment and sometimes even grant a view into the account's deployment process, resources, and backup procedures. And so with that, here are 4 steps that basically you need to take to configure your SSM documents safely. Heads up, AWS administrators. First things first, follow the parameters set by AWS. Don't make information such as activation keys, usernames, and emails in clear text, but only with parameters. Second point, remain vigilant of the information the company posts to the public SSM. Basically, if it seems minor, it could offer, even if it seems minor, I should say, it could offer information to an attacker. Third, do not share, deploy processes, and backup procedures. I cannot stress that enough. That basically gives a roadmap into the infrastructure configuration. That's obviously a huge thing. And finally, review any AWS resources, including the SSM document, to ensure that the configurations are indeed secure. And I see this all the time. When we audit AWS and Microsoft Azure, we see a lot of policies that are simply not put into place, even though they're the best practices guide. It's very complex to spin up AWS or Microsoft Azure, and a lot of, let's say, IT administrators say, oh, well, I can deploy a virtual machine in my environment, so I can deploy it in the cloud. There's a lot of different considerations that go into developing that, and I cannot tell you how many times that we have seen data breaches that I've reported on here, or I've seen personally of sites that are simply leaking it due to not actually adhering to the best practices for security for Amazon, Microsoft, or anything else. And with that, let's move to our another finally, which is Microsoft, because if we're going to be talking about AWS and Amazon, their largest competitor is Microsoft, and here we go. In what appears to be a self-inflicted wound, Microsoft misconfigured its own Microsoft Azure blob or cloud storage buckets, which are housing third-party data, according to researchers at VPN Mentor. Now, VPN Mentor published its timeline and interaction, or lack thereof, with Microsoft as its researchers discovered, then warned the company of basically misconfigurations that they had in their own platform. A variety of organizations whose information was found within the data bucket were pitching Microsoft Dynamics in the hopes of establishing a partnership with Microsoft, and that is one of many that they just found. Now, this report describes over 100 pitch decks and source codes from 10 to 15 companies were exposed. Companies entrusted Microsoft basically with their ideas and intellectual property as part of their effort to become part of the Microsoft Dynamics CRM and ERP ecosystem, and unknowingly had their ideas and intellectual property placed at risk by the misconfiguration. In other words, if I went to Microsoft saying, hey, I want to be part of, I want to be a third-party contractor to the Microsoft Dynamics CRM and ERP and all of that, and here's my pitch, Microsoft, please hire my company to do that. Microsoft was storing that in an insecure manner in the infrastructure that they actually created. Now, as to who has ownership for misconfiguration, VPN Mentor researchers say, and I quote, "We can say that the shared responsibility model puts the burden of properly securing data assets in the hands of the user. Various parties and user organizations may have different short-term priorities and different levels of understanding of concepts of security. This can end up leaving sensitive data exposed. Regardless of the underlying cloud stack, this can have dire consequences," meaning there is no uniformity here, and that level of security is up to the user that is actually placing the data in that particular bucket. Microsoft calls it blob, Amazon calls it S3. Now, the concept of shared responsibility is one that CISOs should basically pursue. Essentially, the cloud provider is responsible for the security of the cloud, while the customer is responsible for the security in the cloud. CISOs should also drive home this idea to basically all who may be placing data into an externally controlled cloud storage environment, meaning Microsoft is giving you that platform. You are basically reading, like on our previous AWS example, how to actually secure this properly, and then you're enforcing those policies for your users that are using that cloud environment. Now, the Microsoft misconfiguration basically accounted for 63 gigabytes of data, or roughly 3,800 files, which had been created in 2016, so 5 years ago. Now, that might be viewed as very minor and inconsequential in 2021, but the owner of the information should be the one to determine its current value. Oftentimes, strategies don't change even if technology does. So that's obviously a huge issue. Those were your breaches of the week. I'm going to be doing a bigger thing on the Colonial Pipeline as we are now settling down off that, which is why I did not mention that here. For those wondering about Colonial Pipeline, trust me, I am going to be going through that. I'm actually going to be speaking about that at a conference very soon as well. So I'm doing my homework on this, as I always do. But those were your breaches of the week. Were you affected? let me know. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.